So let us be in prayer. And now, O God, as we have heard your word read for us, and it is about to be proclaimed, we ask that no careless mind, no callous will, no casual approach may block the entrance of your word in our lives. Amen. I speak to you on the topic, Imagine You, from Mark chapter 1, verse 17. And Jesus said to them, "Come now, follow me, and I will make you become fishers of people." My own translation. I added in something which most translations don't put. Jesus said to them, "Come now, follow me." At a certain age, when we really don't know much about ourselves, we get asked this inevitable question: what do you want to become? What do you want to become when you grow up? After a while, the question can become a little tiresome. But the question requires of young people the ability to imagine themselves as something they are not yet. Quite often, young people give some spectacular answers. Doctors, lawyers, and if you really want to be adventurous, astronauts. And if you want to be regular but important, teachers. Notice very few people will say garbage collector, dock worker, or even a fisher folk. If this question requires imagination, then we will use it to imagine ourselves in something that is compelling, attractive, appealing, and of course, high-paying. So why waste imagination on that which is ordinary and that which has little appeal and approval within the society when given the chance to answer that question? But when you look at it, even the so-called spectacular answers are not using great imagination. It's a way of imagining yourself doing something that already exists. Those regular answers speak to what is already possible, only that a young person has to think of themselves fitting into that which already is. But what if the question and the answer that you could give is to imagine being something that does not yet exist? What does it mean to be called into that which is unknown? To walk upon the waters where your feet will slip. Who is our singer? That is the imagination that I think Jesus is putting before these would-be disciples on this day that he walks past the Sea of Galilee. On that day, he calls 4 young men to embark on what essentially is a made-up profession. Not only is it made up, it is nonsensical. In a sea culture, fishing involved catching sea creatures, not human beings. The practices that passed down from generation to generation found different ways to improve the industry and to get as much as they could from the Sea of Galilee. So when Jesus gives an opportunity to young men on that day, Jesus is not offering them to enter into a new enterprise that is using new technology. Nor is Jesus asking them, come join me in something that is much more profitable than the little industry that you and your fathers have been doing. Instead, Jesus calls them to do something unknown, something that no one knew about. How do you fish for people? What type of nets do you use? Which size boats are most appropriate for that endeavor to give you a good haul? These are the questions we really want the Gospel of Mark to answer. And the Gospel of Mark is just intolerant about answering questions because the writer of the Gospel of Mark is an impatient writer. Because a gospel notorious for its fast pace. Because in this very short passage, Mark is packing in a lot. And even in this one verse, packing in urgency, the urgent word that most translations leave out. Come now, follow me. Not just follow me, come now. Because the answer, the speed of which this demand is given, leaves very little room for discernment. Come now, follow me into this unknown, made-up, nonsensical adventure. And the answer, more than anything, requires Simon and Andrew, James and John to be both quick and imaginative. Imagine seeing themselves doing something no one had ever done before. More than ever, this generation of young people, you find yourselves having both the opportunity and the challenge to imagine being and becoming something no one has seen before. The potential for developing AI systems to destroy existing jobs, even in those very appealing professions like lawyers and doctors and so on, they stand to remake what work looks like. The eagerness with which the technology industry wants to pursue AI, but not just simply pursue AI, they also want to control education systems, should alarm us, not simply because we have to slow down the growth of technology, but we have to ask what it is we do when we put big questions like these into the hands of a few persons, particularly persons who seem to have questionable understanding about the diversity of human beings and little appreciation for what it means to be human. But that notwithstanding, this generation and the ones to come, sooner or later, will live in a world where the jobs as they now exist will be changed, if not already changed. So to ask a young person, what do you want to be when you grow up, must now take account of the times in which we live. Any call to vocation sits within a moment in time. And this time forces us to reckon with a whole lot of other things, including AI. That the thing we want to become, based upon what is now, may never be there later on. That is our historical moment. And we have to rise to it. It is every time God calls within the moments in which we live. Isaiah experiences and sees the glory of God in the year that the transformative King Uzziah dies. And Jesus calls these 4 young men when John the Baptizer is arrested and the action starts to heat up. And Jesus begins to proclaim his message. What do you want to become? What do you want to become in a year after a year that exposed some of the emptiness of the thirst for cryptocurrencies? And one of the foremost leaders in this field of what's being called effective altruism was involved in corruption. But despite all of that, the pursuit of cryptocurrency has not yet ceased. This is the year in which we live. What do you want to become? When the indicators are that the efforts to slow the warming of the planet are not getting as much attraction from the critical people that we would like to have, and that from all indications, destructive weather patterns not conducive to humans living and thriving might continue. What do you want to become? I thought when I was asked or had to face that question myself, I thought I answered the question, settled the matter at age 16. I wanted to become a minister in the Methodist Church. Settled, done. And all the discernment told me that this was the path I should follow. I received the necessary tests and confirmation and affirmation. Church embraced me and said, become that which God has called you to be, and formed me into it. And of course, after a few years, I recognized that I was doing something that I did not want to do. I was pastoring churches that gave me limited opportunity to do the things that brought me passion and the things I was good at. And so I made a change to become something else, something that I could not even imagine existed. But what I do know, neither my imagination nor existing opportunities helped my discernment. In the moment, in the immediacy, it took years to figure it out. It's one thing to answer what it is you want to get into, another thing to figure out how you want to get out of it, and what's the next thing you want to get to. And these are the histories in which we live, young people. It used to be you answered and settled the question. No more. Because these opportunities for your growth and development will come and keep moving you on to other things. Do not ever believe that there is only one moment, one call, one vocation. This is the case with Jonah. Because whatever else happens in chapter 3 of the book of Jonah, the interesting part of that chapter is, and God said to Jonah a second time. A new commission, a new vocation, somewhat. We could argue about Jonah a whole lot. I like to take on that book. But there is no one singular moment that you get settled into. And so for me, I had to make the shift. I entered into academic teaching, biblical studies, and found there precisely the thing that I am good at and the thing that I am passionate about. But even more, I found in this space the thing the world needs. Because the past year as an academic with a background in pastoral leadership allowed me to imagine myself in a broader and more effective positions, not to feed my ego, but to serve the world. How do I get to serve the world if my passions are not ignited? If I am not in a position to do the things that I am good at? So Jesus calls Simon and Andrew to imagine doing what they are good at in a new and in a different way. The call to them was, imagine what they love to do and think of it, doing it in a way in which you have never thought of before. But importantly, Jesus challenges them, because this is more than just simply an ego trip. Jesus challenges them. Imagine doing all of that and meeting the needs of the world. The position fishers of people never existed, but Galilee, in the time of John's arrest and the start of Jesus' proclamation, needed a group of people who would bring the skill of their job of connecting this teacher with other people whom they already knew. Galilee needed fishers who understood frustrations, frustrating days, failing days, but thrilling nights when the catch could come in, and to bring those sensibilities into the daily grind of the people, fishers who could make the abrupt switch of seeing places that are productive or unproductive and adjust accordingly. When the needs of the world and your abilities and your passion comes together, that is where God says, answer the question, what do you want to become? That intersection of what the world needs, what you are good at, what drives and gives you energy is the sweet spot, not only where you thrive as an individual, but you contribute to the transformation of the world in a place where you might be called that you couldn't imagine, in a task that perhaps feels like it was just made up overnight. But unlike Simon and Andrew, God will give you time to discern. This discernment is important, like I said, so that you don't confuse your ego and impose your ego upon the world. This discernment allows you to understand the needs of the world as well. The startup world has done much more than any to teach us how to imagine new jobs. And while that area of our modern life has shown us what innovation looks like, the startup world is another place that fosters self-driven, ego-driven enterprises. Because there are quite a few enterprises that have hit and come onto the scene that justify their presence with philanthropy. But philanthropy is just another cover for their economic greed and capitalist enterprises. This notion that we could make a whole lot of money and do good is simply cover for things, making useless things that the world don't need. They cannibalize existing operations under the guise of efficiency, even if they don't make money, because they know they will sit and wait things out until they could just fill the vacuum. Happily, this is not true of every advance in technology. But this is me saying to you, understand that not every smart and bright idea is what the world needs. We have a lot of smart and bright ideas that are simply useless in making us better people or changing the world. Time for discernment to understand yourself and understand the needs of the world and how all of that comes together. Time for discernment requires you to consider how God aligns your skills and passions with the felt needs of the world. Certainly, you also need to consider how you're going to get paid for these wonderfully imaginative jobs. But this discernment, as you can see, invites you to balance between your needs for a living wage, your needs to be fulfilled, and the demands of the world. And in that space, that's where you hear the voice of Jesus saying, "Come now, follow me." The voice of Jesus calling you to the places that need you the most. The you with the gifts that you already recognize and the ones that you don't even know that will come out of you as you are placed into new situations. The voice of Jesus calling you to imagine yourself as you can be formed, addressing the problems of the city and transforming the conditions of the neighborhood you grew up in so that it doesn't become the place where everybody wants to escape from. The voice of Jesus directing you to lean into those passions and align them with the cries and the pains of persons living in what can be considered the best places in the world, but are not always the happiest. Today marks the observance of Conference Lord's Day. The South Caribbean District Conference has been meeting here And today you will get a chance, or another chance for some of you, to participate in a worship service to mark the occasion. This is a day, I believe, like Isaiah in the temple. You get a sense of the glories and the grandeur and the possibilities of the church and what God could do through the church. You get a sense of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, not just here, but in other parts of the Southern Caribbean and other parts of the world. And today, I hope you get to hear the question again, what it is you want to be. What do you want to become? But I hope you get to hear it in a different way. One way I would ask you to hear that question comes in the words of the poet Mary Oliver in her poem, The Summer Day. And The Summer Day is a very short poem where Mary Oliver does reflections on a grasshopper and the life of a grasshopper. And at the end of the poem, she poses this question: tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. Hear the question, not as, what do you want to become? Hear the question this way: what it is you want to do with this one wild and precious life that God has given you. And when you hear that question go to the space where Jesus' voice says, here are your passions, here are your abilities, here is what the world needs, and we'll throw in some money to help you to make it happen. And I hope you also hear Jesus saying, come now, follow me, let's go do this unimaginable thing. Amen.